That just threw me. It didn't say recording live. It says it's being sent to a third party. It's a new announcement. Hi, my name is Timothy Gager, and I'm welcome to our holiday, our final dire of the year, and my stream of this very special stream of consciousness edition. Our feature tonight is a wonderful poet who I've read with before, and I've read with him live, Mr. Tom Laughlin, and I'm going to show you Tom's bio in a very brief second. I've actually very well prepared this time. There it is. Tom is a professor and coordinator of the creative writing program at Middlesex Community College in Massachusetts, where he teaches creative writing, literature, composition courses, as well as coordinating the MCC Visiting Writers Series and open readings for students, faculty, and community members. He's also coordinated the writing across the curriculum program at Middlesex Community College for many years, coordinated the early academic intervention program, the writing center, and creative writing activities at Massasoit Community College for nearly a decade, and taught literature classes in 2 Massachusetts prisons. He's also published articles in teaching English in the 2-year college and elsewhere, as well as an annual calendar, Stone Balancing at Walden Pond, featuring photos of his stone balancing. His poetry chapbook, The Rest of the Way, was released by Finishing Line Press in 2022. And just to show you, there it is. And it looks like, if folks that don't recognize it, it's Walden Pond. And if you want to find out more about Tom, just go to Tom Laughlin Poet at wordpress.com. Otherwise, you'll go to a 70s movie star.
Yeah, TomLaughlinPoet.com will bring people.
All right, Tom, well, welcome. I'm looking forward to hearing you, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Tim. Thanks to everybody on Zoom and Facebook. It's great to be here for this last dire of the 2023. I'll be reading selections from The Rest of the Way and a newer poem or two. The chapbook is a kind of a greatest hits over many years, and poems in it come from explorations of life lessons, journeys, and experiences with the natural world, family relationships, romantic relationships, as well as response poems. And I'll try to read some of each of those types tonight. I grew up north of Boston, a small town of Topsfield, and was driving home one Christmas and came after driving flat on Route 1 for a long distance, hitting Topsfield and the rolling hills and farms and horses that are there. It struck me how the physical place of home had shaped and become part of me. This poem is called Turning Home. These hills have echoed in my ears for decades, boulder-flecked peaks rattling my windy thoughts, treed birds chirping me higher. I've smelled these fields through my shoulders wherever I pause, sun-drenched blades rippling for wind, rasping every movement, tickling my muscles with hot greenness. These horses have grazed my chest, even now through frosted, crisp December air, tails waving hypnotic symphonies, nostril snorts filling my lungs. This lake has burrowed into my bones, lapping steadily under skin, sky reflecting through turtled fingers, swallowing my muddy darkness. These woods have crackled my feet at every step, oaked messages whispering into souls, hidden twigs laughing between toes, pine tops sprouting through my skull. And a trigger warning for violence for this next poem, the shocking horrors that we've seen in Gaza and Israel and Ukraine and elsewhere in the world, reminding us of the devastation of war and the impact of war and the trauma that affects generations. In World War II, the common rifle was the M1 Garand of the US infantry, and the rifle was designed with shells that kicked off to the right for right-handed soldiers. Someone who was a lefty, it would go in front of their face, or perhaps hit them in the face with that cartridge. And so lefties in a company were often trained and became the user of a flamethrower, horrible weapon that shoots a flame 45 yards and burns everything in its path. This poem is called Flamethrower. A lefty, the guns weren't made for him, so he became a flamethrower, flushing out foxholes that couldn't be cleared. Children on fire still ripped through his dreams, forcing him down to the kitchen chair at 3 in the morning for a cigarette, highball, and late movie. I knew only hatred then, standing below that bald leather head, slapped in the face by the crooked fingers of his open hand. Dead bodies, malaria, teeth knocked in, words shouted into arguments too often to cut deeply when intended, burn years later for Flamethrower's son. I love to listen to improvisational jazz and interested in the interplay between musicians, the sense of joy, appreciation of one another in those moments that are created. But also there's a playful competition there, and love that. And I wanted to sort of capture that in a poem. And then one night I was driving, an August night, listening to Eric in the Evening, WGBH radio program, and the opening lines, an idea for this poem came to me. It's called Jazz. Dancing boy, dancing girl, and a boy again tiptoeing on the wooden raft, circling as it sways. He circles and it sways in the stillness of the creek, around and to the diving board where he rattles and thumps and springs, twirling, floating up and out and curving down to slice, then splash, then explode up and out, splashing, shouting, laughing at the moon, swirling in the hot summer dusk, thrashing and kicking with smiling wetness before climbing the ladder to sit back, smile, and watch to see the girl tiptoe on the swaying dock, circle, no, not circle, almost circle to the edge, then almost circle again as the creek stills, ripples slightly. Anticipation. Her footsteps pat the dampened wood. She finds the worn wooden board, bobs up, rattles, rattles, and slaps, running to take that board, bending, springing as part of her, part of the swing of her arms soaring upward, the slow, subtle arc and twist of her naked shoulders outward, twirling, floating, flying, outward and down, slicing unexpectedly, swallowing her reflection, toes pointing to the last, the aching, unruffling pause before, exploding up, smiling, laughing to herself, to the raft, to that hot moon, dusky August day. And she turns, splashing, suddenly racing toward the reaching branched shore tree. The boy now unfolds his sitting to sprint, thumping and springing out quickly over creek water, spraying strokes, pushing in pursuit of the laughing hare, reaching toward the rooted wildgrass bank. She grabs the knotted rope, past the thick trunk, up the dirt path to, pausing, deep breath jump, holding, hanging, swishing beyond trunk and path, whistling wildly over grassy bank, then water, then over the boy, half out of the creek, caught in a broadening smile of awe and appreciation, watching the arcing girl as she sails, then dances on her smooth watered reflection. And here's a short love poem that comes out of walking hand in hand to a poetry reading. It's called Skinship. In Japan and Korea, that term skinship is used to name that importance of physical touch between a baby and mother or father. And that term has also been expanded to think about throughout our complete lives. Skinship. Beacon Street made way for us, walking together this evening to the bookstore. Inside now, we take our seats in the crowd, spaced for social distance, while the venerable poet steps to the podium with her new poems that grab and weave, through Paris streets and smoky Beirut cafes of exiles and refugees, voices flavored by shawarma, jambon beurre, and cups of Halib Mahal. But the after-warmth of you is fading, and my hand hungers for your fingers on the soft warmth of your lower back curving gently against me. As Tim mentioned, I taught in prisons, and one of my students was in the news for a few years recently, and that got me thinking back to those experiences and writing about those experiences. And this poem was published in the spring issue of Pensive. A couple of notes. Movement refers to the 10 minutes every hour when people are able to move between buildings, and CO is correctional officers. The poem is called Going to Prison Tuesday Nights. Released from my office on a tree-lined college campus, I cruise the colors of the city and further west down narrowing roads. In a thick band of woods, South Walpole's Winter Street forgets its name, passing over the Stop River to become Clark Street in Norfolk, where the trees drop away for barren fields, like an emptied moat before high stone walls topped with razor wire. Inside, sealed behind 6 coats of light neutral, the cement block walls have stopped dreaming of sunlight, the twin fluorescent bands overhead their only friend. The speckled gray linoleum floor won't talk, even when scuffed by the desk chairs brought in to impersonate a classroom, or when I arrived during 6 p.m. movement. But with the door closed and COs nowhere in sight, voices echo so eagerly that I strain to hear the student beside me. And Tim, time for another, or are you ready to call it?
Yeah, give us one more.
Okay, sure. Mary Oliver was one of my favorite poets, and she died in January of 2019. I swim in lakes and ponds May through October, and I had an experience swimming at Walden Pond in September of 2019 that reminded me of Mary Oliver and her famous poem, The Summer Day, in which she holds a grasshopper in her hand. And my poem is a response poem to hers called The Late Summer Day for Mary Oliver. Halfway across Walden Pond, the mid-September sun, bright above the tree line, reflects off the smooth surface and warms my squinting face as I swim, my hands reaching gently through the clear water of this late afternoon. The thickness of woods along the shores holds me in its arms as I turn to swim back toward sandy shore and the old wooden bathhouse basking in light with a speckle of old swimmers and beach chair readers. Floating in the water just ahead of me, a small stick or piece of trash distracts me until closer I see the light green body, the orange stripe, and the small legs of a grasshopper, motionless. How did she get here, far out in the middle, with no grass or land in sight? No boats today, with a fisherman who may not have noticed a quiet stowaway. And how have the trout, bass, and pickerel missed this tasty morsel? I reach to cup its body in one hand, water draining through my fingers to see and feel the hair-like front legs and feathery body until it jumps, alive suddenly. How? Landing just ahead, back on the water. I'm the only island in sight, I think, and slower this time, cup my hand and lift, gently carrying her toward the top of my head, where she steps on, clinging to my wet hair. Holding my neck and head as still as possible on the long swim in, I feel her move through my hair, climbing to higher ground perhaps, and I wonder what she sees from her perch with those enormous and complicated eyes, and whether Mary Oliver ever carried a grasshopper on her head. As my feet touch sand, my head rising with its passenger, I walk slowly out of the water, across the sand, past toweling swimmers and a curious child, up to the stone-walled ledge where I bow my head to the thick blades of green beyond, feel the small snap of her back legs, and see her fling herself back into the grass. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. And so let's have a little chat here. So your poems, I've noticed that you use and you incorporate many, and if not all of the five senses. Does that come naturally to you when you're writing the first draft of a poem, or are you aware of wanting to add and like a recipe, sprinkle in the senses?
I think it's usually organic. I guess there may be times, but mostly it is, yeah, I think it's organic. And I guess I see in images and sounds and colors, that come alive for me and help me travel
Yeah,
poetic journeys.
the poems are very visual, and so if you're like, do you sit outside? Your poems are all very much based in nature, and Walden Pond. It seems like your love for Walden Pond is there, and it's obvious based on your cover and your poetry. Do you ever go outside and sit there until a poem comes to you, or are you outside, or are you inside thinking about being outside?
The Wordsworth talking about reflection, emotion reflected in tranquility. But I think I have written outside, and I camp up in Maine, and am outside sometimes writing. I do hike every day or swim. By the way, the cover actually, I live near Lake Contituate, and the cover is actually Lake Contituate and not Walden Pond, even though I write about both of those places in the book. But I think the experiences of being in nature sort of echo for me. And when I do turn to write, I guess those moments I draw upon. And other times, walking poems come to me, or running. One poem, the cover poem, The Rest of the Way, comes out of jogging the UMass Peninsula, actually, and imagining sort of a local person walking someone in that area and sort of pointing out things. So that came in the rhythms of running, actually, and sort of wrote it while I ran.
Now, how do you remember? Do you turn your phone on and take notes while you run, or do you physically stop the run?
That one, I think I kept trying to, repeat it to myself and go through things, and then got it down as soon as I can. In the past, I sometimes had old school small tape recorder I used to use and carry around, and for notes and for other things, but also snippets of lines that I would copy down later and try and capture some of those beginnings. Yeah. The jazz poem came to me while I was listening, as I mentioned, to jazz. And I was driving, actually Route 1 at the time. And I usually have lots of paper and all sorts of things in my car, but I had cleaned it out recently. And that came to me in the first lines, and I pulled over and couldn't find any paper to write on. And I ran into a gas station. And this was a while ago. But went into a gas station. I was like, "Do you have anything to write on?" The F, I don't know what you're talking about. And I said, "Really, anything?" And he looked down, and in those olden days, they used to have these gas slips, and he had a stack of things under a counter, these charge slips that would go with this metal slide credit card thing that, if you remember from old gas stations. And he said, "I got these," and I said, "Sure, I'll take them." And so the beginnings of that poem are scribbled all over these gas slips, and I still have them in a file somewhere. So that was kind of funny, but I at least got the beginnings of that poem.
So I think you might have answered this while you were reading or right now. Is there a special connection with Walden Pond specifically?
It has added because of Thoreau. I drive by it for the past 23 years to and from work, and reading of Thoreau and the connections that resonate there. And there's just such a community of swimmers and other people there. So there's a lot of magic there for me. But I have been swimming forever in Houghton Pond and, Ponkapog and all over in I always say in New England, if you spit, you hit a pond or a lake. So
Or a poet.
yeah, true. So I swim all over the place, and but more recently Walden. But Walden gets too crowded in the summer, so I live near Lake Atittuit, and I tend to swim more there in the summertime than Walden, in the thick of the season. So yeah,
Yeah, Walden gets quickly transformed into like a water park
yeah,
somehow.
yeah.
So you also at your school, you have a visitor writers program. Who have you had at that program?
We have had Daniel Legros Georges, who's here. We've had Martha Collins. We've had John Fulton recently, and I think I was at a reading. He did a reading this past summer here for you. January O'Neill, Maggie Dietz, Sandra Lim, big list of people. And we try and draw upon area writers who are at universities that may be able to not only read new works they have or a new book out, but also to help our students make some connections to places that they might transfer to. UMass Lowell and UMass Boston. And Joe Torra is reading this coming spring, Joan Houlihan also. So we try to help them make connections, and it's been great. Jill McDonough from UMass Boston was wonderful. Lots of just amazing people.
Besides students, do a lot of people outside from the community come to these readings?
There's some, yeah, word usually goes out, our marketing people and all that sort of thing, get things out in newspapers. So we do have community people both in the Lowell, we have my colleges in both Lowell and Bedford campuses. And so newspapers in the area, end up getting things out. And so we have a handful of people from the community, depending on who's reading. But faculty and staff and students, and we have a creative writing program with creative writing majors at the school, and so try to schedule those during classes so that we ensure so many community college students are juggling so much and working while they're going to school and all that. So we try to schedule sort of during class time, and it guarantee that they get some exposure to these writers. And we bring them into class. Danielle did a wonderful workshop in one of our creative writing classes in addition to doing her reading on translation. So that was amazing, and the students loved it.
John Riley asked, do you feel connected to transcendentalism?
I do. It speaks to me. I guess that's also one of those reasons I'm drawn to Walden. And we have a literary magazine in our college that's Thoreau inspired, called Dead River Review. And he, in his 2 weeks on the Concord and Merrimack Rivers, describes an area near our campus that widens in the river when they wake up as calm and dead calm. And so that journal name came out of that, Dead River Review. So my echoes.
Danielle Legros George asks, thanks, Tom, for these. She says, thanks, Tom, for these lovely poems. What do you feel to be, stop it, one of the icons from Zoom are getting in the way of the actual question? There you go. What do you feel to be the new direction of your work?
Well, I have, do a lot with response poems of different kinds of poets and music, as you heard, and art. I am trying to, I have a plan to work with Somerville artist Matt Carano, who's a painter, and to work collaboratively on some writing, and perhaps him writing paintings inspired by my poetry. I did a poem in the past, and someone reached out in a grant, so I may do some more with that. So that's one of the areas that I'm stretching, ekphrastic poetry.
Part of your resume said that you were a reader for Ploughshares. What did you learn as a writer from reading submissions?
Well, one thing is that there's, the percentage and the randomness of being selected sometimes with journals. I started as a volunteer. I was a volunteer writer, so I got the start of the larger piles and narrowed those down further and further. It got me thinking and looking at different styles and forms and stretching myself in different ways, language poets, and thinking about different forms as well as free verse and other things, and different topics and ways that people, things that I loved, got me thinking about what I might do to think about exploring personal relationships and tragedies and all sorts of things. Yeah.
Your poems seem to just explode with language as well. So, given that you're a revision process, do you throw down the words on a page and then revise and shape from there, or are you crafting each line as you go? What is your process?
It depends on the poem sometimes, and there are poems that come more quickly and just get out, and there are other ones that take years and go through many drafts and revisions. And I think of a poem that was a huge narrative poem and a prison related, another prison poem. And I have a writing group, and they responded with, "There's just so much here." And I had so much I wanted to say. And I forced myself with a villanelle. I said, can I squeeze all this stuff, multiple pages somehow, in some form? And so I tried a villanelle, and I think it came out well, but it was hard to let go of so much of that writing and, condense it down. But I think it came out strong, and it was a helpful process for me to realize I need to cut loose and let things go. And the thing about computers, though, we can always hold on to things, and I have a million versions of things. Below every poem, there's, every change I just copy and move it down, and I could always go back to an earlier one. So I guess that's part of that process for me, is trying new things and copying and seeing what that looks like, and going back and forth with those over time. Yeah.
When you do something like that, and you look at previous versions of the poem, does it sometimes negate other lines or other thoughts further down? Further down the page is what I meant.
Yeah, there's a lot of cutting and a lot of shaping, and yeah, they're and also the rhythms of lines and sounds. So I do go back and forth, but often it's more progressing, and I'll turn back and say, yeah, that's why I went and made that cut and let go of that line or change that word there. So more often than not, I'm not, throwing away the new version and going back to the old version. It tends to be a process that moves forward in the change and the rhythms and the cuts that lead me to, and explorations that lead me to that new poem. Yeah.
So Sarah Sarai says, your descriptions are not limited to nature. I was especially struck by the prison poem. Your description of place, paint, color, wall, I know it's linoleum too, really struck me. Is there a difference between describing nature in the made world? In terms of the description of.
Yeah. That's a really great question. And I think that every environment is a nature in itself, may not be organic, but has a feel and a sense, and a sound, and that certainly place did, the ways that sound echoed and colors and other things. A lot of my work, I guess, and what I do personally is move often daily from the busyness of the world and teaching and the paying the bills and running around to nature that helps to calm and move me to some meditative journey space. And so a lot of my poems sort of move from that busyness of the world to a more natural space. But so somehow, I guess, to me, the natural world has a quieter and a more centered atmosphere than the busyness of the world and the linoleum and all that of the peopled world and mechanical world that we move around in so often daily.
Great answer to that question. That was an excellent question as well.
Yeah.
So Tom, thank you so much for being our guest. I would like to once again show people what as I always have that. There it is. So there's the book, The Rest of the Way. And where can people find this, Tom?
So tomlaughlinpoet.com is the website, but you can buy that bookstores and Amazon and the publisher, all that. There's multiple places. If you click on the website, it has, where you can buy it, but your local bookstore and all different, down the bottom there. So it's out of Finishing Line Press out of Kentucky, and their Horses Finishing Line, but you can go to and put in your local bookshop and buy it there, and support your local bookshop is what I would recommend.
Here's the tutorial about how to add it to your cart. Look at that.
Look at that. See,
fantastic.
good work.
Tom, thanks again. Those folks that are watching this feed on the Facebook feed, if you'd like to be involved in the open mic, please use the Zoom link and I will let you in. And also, thank you for watching. And Tom, thank you once again.
Thank you so much, Tim. This was wonderful being here. And thanks everybody who's here, and great questions.
All right. Awesome.
Okay.
Where is the